Hello and welcome to the HTML in 60 minutes course, where you will learn how to write professional HTML and HTML5 code in just 1 hour. So if you really want to learn HTML and dive into the development world, this is the perfect start for you. I will give away half this course for free here on YouTube, which is all you need to get started with the basics in HTML. But if you want to learn more, I would suggest you to take the entire course, which is available on Udemy. I'm giving away 40 completely free full courses on Udemy. Check the description in the video for the free course. And I would really appreciate it if you leave a course review on Udemy if you take the course for free. I have designed this course for the absolute beginner without any coding experience who wants to take a step into the web development world by learning HTML properly and in depth. This course is also suitable for the experienced HTML developer who wants to upgrade his or her knowledge. This course will cover writing professional HTML and HTML5 code, semantic and non-semantic elements that every HTML developer should know, working with element attributes, creating form markup for forms such as register or login forms, and how to work with HTML5 form validation. Defining metadata in a web page, writing responsive source code that looks good on any device, creating and linking multiple pages together. You will learn how to write SEO optimized source code, and finally we will summarize everything you have learned during the course. By the end of the course, you will be able to create HTML markup for professional websites and web applications, as well as writing SEO optimized source code to gain more traffic to your website for you or your clients. So why should I learn HTML? The answer to that is simple. HTML is the fundamental technology behind everything you see in a web browser, and every developer and programmer should have a basic understanding of HTML and how it works. No matter how complicated your web page or your web application might be in the end, you always start off with HTML. Markup similar to HTML is also used for creating layouts in modern mobile apps, which makes the progress to start creating user interfaces in mobile apps much easier if you know HTML. Similar markup is also used in XML, which you as a developer might encounter from time to time when working with, for example, APIs to fetch data. HTML is the very first thing you should know before moving on to, for example, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, or any other programming language. And even though you do not intend to be working directly with HTML, you will probably encounter it sooner or later. So what exactly is HTML? Well, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's used for defining the content of a web page. It is, in other words, everything you see on a web page, but not how you see it. It is unstyled markup. Now take a look at this browser sketch here. Each box inside this browser window is created with HTML. The colored part is HTML, and the gray boxes that simulate text inside each box is HTML as well. How they are positioned inside the browser, styled and colored, is however not HTML. That is done by something called CSS, which is used to style and position HTML elements. But in order to add style, of course, first you need something to style. That something, in this case, is HTML. Now all HTML elements are defined by tags, as you can see an example with a section tag. The tags are not displayed by the browser, but rather used by the browser to render the content of a web page. And HTML files are just simple text files that anyone can create. And in this course, you will learn everything you need to know and more to become an expert at HTML. So now we're gonna go ahead and create an HTML5 web page. Now before we begin, if you've never written a single line of code previously, you will need a text editor. Now you could create HTML web pages in Word or Notepad or something like that, but I would recommend that you get a proper text editor like the one I'm using. Now I'm using Sublime Text, so I would recommend that you go to sublimetext.com, click download. This is just a normal installer, so click next, 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 and this will install Sublime Text for you. I'm just gonna go ahead and close down this tab. Now when you have installed Sublime Text, go ahead and create a new folder anywhere on your computer and name it My Web Page. Then open up Sublime Text. Inside Sublime Text, go to File, Open Folder, and select the folder you just created. Now inside Sublime Text, we're gonna right click My Web Page folder and select New File. We're gonna save this file as index.html. And now we're gonna actually create our very first HTML web page. To do this within Sublime Text, just type the smaller than sign followed by HTML, then hit the tab on your keyboard. And as you can see, Sublime Text just created a new HTML5 document for us. Go ahead and save the file, and then we're actually gonna open up this file in the browser. So go ahead and open up the My Web Page folder. Right click index.html, select open with, and choose the browser you want to open the file with. Now I would recommend that you use Google Chrome, so I'm gonna select Google Chrome. And now anytime you make a change in this file, you're gonna go over to the browser and reload the browser to see the changes. Now I'm just gonna open up this, which is the file I'm working with. Now this file, the index.html, is the first page that the web server will look for when serving a web page, and as default, index.html is the page that will be served to the browser. In other words, what the web page visitor will initially see when visiting your web page. Now before we start diving into the code here, I'm just gonna explain my workspace fast. I will be using my text editor right here to the right and the browser to the left at all time. Also, you might notice that in my browser the URL says 127.0.0.1.8080, while in your browser there's a file path. That's because I'm using a live server, but you don't have to do that. Now if you're already using a live server, feel free to do that, but if you're not, you don't have to. You can just work with this. I'm just gonna go ahead and close this since I'm working with the live server. And now throughout this course I will reference a single HTML document like this, which is really what you are creating when creating a HTML file, as web page. And I will reference multiple web pages as a website. Now we will go through what every part of this web page means. Let's start at the top with the doc type HTML declaration. Now this declaration defines this document to be HTML5. This tells the browser that will load this web page that this is an HTML5 web page. The HTML element, which starts here and ends down here, is the root element of the entire web page. The head element, which starts here and ends down here, contains metadata about the web page. For example, a web page description, the character set used, and how to control the web page dimensions and scaling. And we will create all metadata tags any developer should know later in this course, so don't worry about that. The title element, right here, specifies a title for the document. So let's go ahead and create a title right now between these two title tags, so between this opening tag and this closing tag. So right here, I'm just gonna add some spacing to make it easier to read. Now let's add a name for this web page. We can call it My Web Page and hit save. And if you refresh the browser now, you can see that we got a title in the web page. And don't worry if you don't know what a tag is, like this title tag. We will cover everything you need to know about tags in just a minute. Now for the final part, the body element contains the visible page content. This means that everything placed between the body opening tag, which is this tag, and the closing tag, which is this tag, is what will be visible inside the web page. So let's say that we would add some text here. Let's just say hello world and click save, and you can see that we got some content now in the browser. We got a text saying hello world. Now that you know the basic structure of a HTML web page, we're going to take a look at HTML tags. A HTML web page is created by multiple elements which are defined by tags. An HTML element usually consists of an opening tag and a closing tag. Between the opening tag and the closing tag, you can add content. Now we will create our tags within the body element, so right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this text, and also I'm just gonna add a little bit of spacing here to make it easier to read. Now an HTML tag is written like this. Notice that the element my tag, which I created now, does not exist and is not valid HTML. This is just to show you how to define tags. And don't worry, we will go through all the different element names you need to know in just a minute. Now a HTML tag is defined by an opening tag, right here, followed by a closing tag, right here. In between these tags we have content. The content can be pure text, like here, or another HTML element. For example, a P element, which stands for paragraph. Notice that the actual tag is not rendered inside the browser, only the content inside the tag is visible. So as you can see now in the browser we have absolute zero output, we have nothing. But if we add some text, let's say in the paragraph element, let's say I'm text, you can see that we get some text output in the browser. Now the opening tag, right here, is defined by a less than sign, followed by the tag name, which in this case is my tag, followed by a greater than sign. And the closing tag down here looks exactly the same as the opening tag, but you close it with a backslash, like that. And the backslash should always be right before the tag name. Now as you see here, HTML tags and HTML elements can also be nested, which means an element can contain other elements. As you see right here, the my tag element contains a paragraph element. Also, HTML elements can be semantic or non-semantic. If the element is semantic, it describes its meaning by its name. For example, section. If the element is non-semantic, it does not say anything about its meaning, for example, the P element. Now these semantics elements were introduced in HTML5, and you will learn more about semantics and non-semantics in the following lecture. Semantic elements were introduced in HTML5 and help search engines identify the correct web page content. Semantic elements also allow us to structure HTML documents in a much more meaningful way, and they make the markup easier to understand both for the developer and for the browser. A semantic element clearly describes its meaning to the browser and the developer by its name. It is in that way the opposite of a non-semantic element. And we will go through a couple of commonly used semantic elements. Now we will not cover all elements that are available in HTML since there are too many to cover. Instead, you can go ahead and Google HTML elements reference Mozilla developer after this course to see a complete list of all HTML elements. And when you know how to use one HTML element, it is very easy to use any HTML element. Now we will start by taking a look at the header element. It is written like this. The header element defines a header for a web page. Now we will not fill this header element with any content yet. Instead we will just create the basic markup for now. But inside the header you would normally keep, for example, a logo type. We're also gonna take a look at the nav element, which is written like this. The nav element stands for navigation, and it defines a container for navigation links. So if you had, let's say, one home page, one about us page, one products page, and one contact us page, you would have all these links, the links to all these pages inside the navigation element. Now there's also a section element, and this defines a section in a web page. This could be a section of any kind, for example a main section which contains the main content of the web page. There's also the article, which is written like this. The article elements defines, for example, a blog post or a news story. So if you had a, let's say, a news homepage where you just had, let's say, 20 news on the homepage, you would wrap them in an article element. Now there's also the aside element, is written like this. The aside element defines content aside from the content, like, for example, a sidebar. And then finally there's the footer at the end of the page. And this just defines a footer for a web page where you maybe would keep a sitemap of your site. You could keep contact information, copyright information, or something like that. Now these semantic elements are the most commonly used. So let's also take a look at non-semantic elements. A non-semantic HTML element says nothing about its meaning in its name, which in that way makes it the opposite of a semantic element. And now we will go through a couple of commonly used HTML non-semantic elements. I'm just gonna go ahead and zoom out the code a little bit so you can see it clearer, and then open up the section element that we defined earlier. Inside the section element, we're gonna start by defining an h1 tag. It's written like this. The h1 tag defines a text header, and inside we can add the text that we want our header to be. So let's say my website. As you can see now, we got a header in the web page. Now let's go ahead and copy this and create two more headers. And we can name this second one h2, and the last one, let's name it h3. Now the h elements span from h1 to a total of h6, and as you can see, they decrease in size the larger the number. And now something to keep in mind when working with h tags is that you should always respect the structure of them. The h1 tag should always be the uppermost h tag. It should be the first one. If you got a subheader, you should not use h1 again, you should use h2. And if you got a subheader, you would use h3, and so on and so on. Now this is also good to keep in mind because Google and other search engines will use these h tags to actually index the content of your web page. So this is good for your SEO as well. We will cover more about writing SEO optimized source code later in this course. For now, let's just remove these last two headers. Now something else you commonly use is the paragraph element. This defines a paragraph in which we can add some text. So let's just say I am text. As you can see now we got some text here in a paragraph. Now to create a line break in HTML you can use what's called a BR tag. It's just written like this and it stands for line break. As you can see now we're getting a line break between I am and text, right where I placed it between I am and the text word. But we're gonna remove that for now. Now let's go up to the nav element, which is the navigation element. Now something you would commonly use within a nav element is a UL element, which stands for unordered list, and it's written like this. Inside the unordered list you normally use something called an LI item, which stands for list item. As you can see, if I add some text inside the list item, we get an item here. So this is just for creating lists. If I create another list item below this one and add, let's say item 2, you can see we're getting a list here. I'm gonna remove this last item. Now within the LI item, you usually add something like a link if it's in the navigation, like in this case. So let's go ahead and create a link. It's written like this, just the A tag, opening tag and closing tag. Now this is a link tag and it defines a hyperlink to another website or to another page on your website. So it could link to google.com or it could link to your own web page, maybe your contact page or about page. And we will create the actual link for this tag in just a couple of minutes, but let's add some anchor text for it. For now, let's just say I am a link. Now this here is called the anchor text, and this is well used by search engines when they are indexing your site to see what the link leads to and what defines the link. But we will cover that more later. For now you just need to know that this is a hyperlink which can be linked to another page. Also, yeah, we'll create the actual link for this tag in just a couple of minutes, so we'll just leave this as it is for now. Now something else you commonly use is a div. So let's go down to the section part again and define a div. It's written like this. And let's add some content in. Let's just say hello. Now the div defines a document division and it gets its own section of a web page. A div is a block level element, which means that it's its own section of the web page. Okay, so if I would add another div here below the first div, you can see that we got hello in the first div and hi in the second div, and they are stacked along the y-axis below each other. Okay, I'm gonna remove this. This is a block level element. Now let's create, inside the div, let's create a span element. It's written like this. A span element is used to group inline elements in a document. So let's, inside the span element, let's say span element 1, and under this one we can create a new span element. Let's say span element 2. Now as you can see, these are the opposite of the div. The div got aligned along the y-axis. Now these span elements, they are inline elements, so they will be aligned next to each other. Okay, I'm just gonna remove that last one for now. Just keep it like that. Now something you commonly used as well is the image tag. So let's go up to the header. Something you normally use an image for is, for example, a logo type. So let's just define the image here. Now the image tag defines exactly what it sounds like. It defines an image. And now notice that this image will be blank since we have not provided a source, but we will provide the image with a source in just a minute. And also notice that none of these elements are styled whatsoever. They are just simply put inside the web page. That is because this is only HTML markup. To style the elements, you would use CSS, which is used for positioning and styling the elements. But this is a couple of very commonly used non-semantic HTML elements, which we will take a look at in the following lecture, how to use them a little bit more, how to add attributes to them, how to make the image display an image, how to make the link somewhere. So we'll cover that in just a couple of minutes. All HTML elements can have something called an attribute. An attribute provides additional information about an element. And we will cover the attributes you need to know in this lecture, and you will learn more about attributes as we proceed in this course. Now we'll start by taking a look at the image source attribute, which is written like this. It's this green part and it's named source. In the source, you're gonna either specify a URL path to an image or a path on your file system. Now for this example, I have actually downloaded an image right here, which I'm gonna just paste into the my web page folder. And you can see the image in Sublime Text right here. Now I'm just gonna specify the source as image1.jpg, and as you can see, we're getting an image in the web page. Now you can also specify a width attribute on images. Let's set it to 500. This means it will be 500 pixels in width. And let's set height. Let's set it to 500. This will distort the image because the correct ratio is not kept. Instead, we will set the height to auto, like that. Now we're also going to take a look at the image alt attribute, which is written like this. The alt attribute specifies an alternative text to be used when an image cannot be displayed. The alt tag is also used by search engines when they index your image in their database. And we'll cover more about this in the SEO part later in this course. Let's set the alt text to my image. Now if we would remove the source, so the image cannot be displayed, instead you will see the alt text here. But for now, let's return the source. We got a correct source to the image. Now we're also going to take a look at the HREF attribute, which will let us link this hyperlink to a page. The link's address is specified in the href attribute, which is written like this. In the href attribute, you would provide a source to either a completely different website or to a web page on your own website. So let's just set this to, we can set it to google.com in this example. So now when I click here, we will get taken to Google, as you can see. Now I'm just going to press back so we can return to web page. Now there's also something called, I'm just going to add some spacing here. Also something called a target attribute on links, which is specified like this. Now you can set this to self. If you click here now, as you can see, not a new browser tab is opened. However, if you would type blank here instead and press, as you can see, a new window is opened, a new browser tab. But we're gonna keep this to self for now. Later in this course, we will also take a look at creating and linking multiple pages together. Now there's also something called the style attribute, which is actually CSS Styles. So we won't cover every style there is in CSS, but I'm gonna show you how it's used. Now let's go down to this p tag. And normally when creating styles you would define the styles in a style sheet, but you can do it inline in HTML. Then you would write it like this. So this is the style attribute. Now you could give this, let's say, a color. Let's just say blue, like that. And as you can see now, this text is blue. You could also add, let's say, you can change it to background color. And the background color of this paragraph element would be blue. Let's keep it like that for now. You can also specify your very own attributes by naming them data followed by the name you want for the attribute. For example, let's say we want to create an attribute on this div right here, and we want it to be named, let's say, data number, and let's set it to 1. Now you could use this in, for example, JavaScript and do whatever you want with it. Maybe you have a lot of divs and you want to keep track of which div is which in some way. Then you can use your own attributes, your own data attributes. Just keep in mind that you should always specify them as data like this, followed by the name of your own attribute. Now there's also something in HTML web pages called the lang attribute, and it's specified at the top here at the HTML element. So we're gonna set this to lang equals with, let's say we want this to be in US, and you would say lang equals with English US. Now the lang attribute is used to assist search engines and browsers to know which language is displayed in a web page.